All right, fastest 15 minutes on the internet, fastest 15 minutes in social media. My name is Judson Powell. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button for me. And most of all, hit that love button. All right, anyway, here we go. All right, I've been on the Mayat kick. And that's what I've been studying. And I've been going through and I've been really studying it because as a lawyer, one thing that I always have been really intrigued with is laws. And so I wrote a book. Wow, I guess that must have been like 10 years ago now. It's been a while, but I wrote a book and it was called The Power of 10. And it was about the 10 commandments. And it wasn't about all of the commandment. I mean, it wasn't about all of the laws and commandments in the Bible because they're actually, people have counted them out. There's 613 of them. All right, but I guess so that's always like consumed me because I've always been like into law. And even before I became a lawyer, I used to study stuff like Hammurabi's Code, and then just how did people govern themselves and organize themselves. And so as I started to study more, and once I got into the Kemetic thing, and people started teaching me about Mayat, I was like, whoa, then there was really the only thing that there is, or the only thing that there was Mayat. And everything came from Mayat. So and so that's how come I always talk about like the origins of things because what most of the time what has been done is the origin has been wiped clean and then somebody else has taken credit for it. And that's what has been done in law. I think that the problem that most people are having is that they can't understand Mayat or they don't want to accept Mayat. Number one, because of something we've already talked about, which is the timeline. They don't realize that Mayat, the concepts and the negative confessions of Mayat existed at least 50 to 60,000 years before the Bible ever comes about. The other thing is that they don't realize is that there were no written languages before Cush and Kemet. So no written languages. So once again, I try to get y'all to understand this. And if there was if there was something there before you wrote yours, then basically you plagiarized it or you copied it, or at best, even if you changed it up a little bit, you took the original and you tried to, I guess, improve on it. I guess that's what we could say. But so now with Mayat, all of the principles that are in the Bible, okay, or in the Quran, or in the Rig Vedas, all right, they're all in Mayat. Okay, they were already there. There are different derivatives, and with a lot of it, especially in Judaism, a lot of it is, as I later found out, and as some of my Jewish friends taught me, it was like a lot of the stuff that's in there is what? It's rabbinical law. It was laws that were created not by God, but by the rabbis because it was in order to make a better set of rules to live by, because there were certain things that were detrimental to people's health and detrimental to their welfare and all that kind of stuff. Just like I try to tell people about, like, even the dietary law. The dietary law is a rabbinical law. Okay, it's not written by God. God never said, God never said, don't eat, shellfish, or don't eat this or don't eat that. Because how do you know? Because people been eating it forever and it don't kill them. All right. Just like people always talking, I see all these posts, oh, y'all eat pig and y'all eat swine and all this kind of stuff. Well, people been eating pig for thousands of years, and people been living long lives eating pig. And the same thing with shellfish or fish that are bottom dwellers and all that kind of stuff, And it's true. I mean, and so if you go and you look at these things, you'll figure out, like, look, people wrote this stuff because it was detrimental to the health and the well-being of people. And what was detrimental? So, for example, in the dietary law, the reason why they said don't eat certain things was why? Because at that time they had no refrigeration. 2,000 years ago, there were no refrigerators. There was no inspections. There was no USDA to inspect meat or to inspect seafood or anything like that. There was no way to refrigerate it and to keep it over long periods of time. And the only thing that they had in order to do it was what? Salt or sodium, which is what, in large quantities, it's bad for you. All right. So they had to preserve everything in salt or preserve it, in other ways. And then, like I said, no refrigeration. Refrigeration doesn't come around until like thousands of years later. Okay. At least 1,000, 1,500 years later, that's when refrigeration is a relatively new concept. So, and then the other thing is there were diseases. Disease was easily spread because we didn't have vaccines. And the major disease, what was caused by pigs, was trichinosis. And so that disease spread very easily and it killed a lot of people. Why? And the other thing is, and then they didn't, there was no methodology to cooking. All right. So we all know that there are certain meats, just like people don't realize that chicken broth will spoil quickly. Right. Or certain things like that. If nobody realizes that, but that's how come people still, even to this day, get certain forms of food poisoning. And the same thing with shellfish. Shellfish go bad very quickly. If you take fish, if you got a regular fish, it doesn't go bad as quickly as shellfish. All right. So that's why these things were created. And even a lot of the laws in the sexual and the marriage laws and all of those kind of things, those things were created or their rabbinical law. They were created in order to what? In order to bring a legitimate order to the Jewish society. That's why they were created. It had nothing. God didn't say this or say that, and when all this stuff was rewritten, it was rewritten. Why? So that the aristocracy could have power and control. Because you have to remember, before the King James Bible in 1611, and even a little while after that, people did not read the Bible. And see, that's the other thing. We have a phony, or the Quran. We have a phony concept of what it is, to read the Bible or read the Quran and all these things, because the common everyday people were not allowed to read these books. All right. And everything went according to what? To what the priest or the rabbi or the imam was told you, and that's what you believe. And in fact, it's still, let's be honest, there's a lot of people like that today. They still believe like whatever their pastor says, whatever their rabbi says, whatever, even the Pope strays from biblical scripture and says things that are unbiblical. Why? Because that's just the way that it's always been. And then after King James came out with the Bible, after he came out with his version of the Bible, then, maybe, 50 to 100 years later, Bibles started becoming available to the common, everyday, ordinary person. But in history, the prior 1,400 years, people could not read the Bible. You could not just go and get a Bible and read it or whatever. It was not only the aristocracy, and then even the aristocracy had scribes and also monks or things. If you read the Bible, go back and read those Levitical scriptures, and it'll show you they had people. They would get a priest to live in their house. If they were rich, you would have a priest or or a scribe or somebody like that who actually stayed in your house and stayed with you and actually would teach you these things. So people reading the Bible is a relatively new concept. And so that's why I try to tell you is like so one of the most detrimental things to Africans and the descendants of Africans and the descendants of slavery is the fact that that did exist, and that so basically they accepted whatever that particular person told them was true, and they accepted it for fact or as factual. And so they never like, now we fact check everything, so they never fact checked anything. They just accepted whatever that priest or that rabbi or that imam said that was okay, all right, we whatever they say. And that's why going to church or the mosque or the synagogue was a very important part of their lives. And so as time has gone on, and then even now we can realize like certain things are true and certain things are not true. Just like how many women in the church like go by the the scriptures that are there to talk about women. Like if you read the Bible literally, and you're like, and I know, and this is like one of the biggest arguments, but epistle law, we're talking about laws. The laws in the epistles are completely, anti-woman. There would be, women not allowed to speak in the church, not allowed to usurp authority from a man, not allowed to teach, not allowed to, basically not allowed to do anything. But is that really true in church? No. Let's be honest. I mean, we got women pastors, and now we got women bishops and women apostles and women this, that, and the other thing. But and that's how look, the Bible was written by men as a tool of power and control, even over women, because women, and I teach this, women were the first slaves. They were the first property. So, but they couldn't say, oh, well, God is a woman and then sell you, and then turn around and sell you as slaves. So the sex trafficking and all that stuff, that's been going on for centuries. It didn't just start now. And they were the first. If you read history, go back and read history, and you will discover, even in the scriptures, Rahab, where we get the word rehabilitation, she was a prostitute and ran a brothel, but she was the one that was responsible for delivering the spies into the promised land, so to speak, right? Think about it. Okay, so why was she included, or why was she there? So you have to understand all of these things are written in, because it had to be written in so that it would be okay. See, because if I had a book and it said thou shalt not, and it's strictly thou shalt not, and I have to take whatever God said literally, none of this stuff would exist. Think about it. I mean, and y'all, people get mad at you and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's no way in the world that it could exist. It could not. It could not exist, in its purest form. All right, and all of these things were made up by men, not by God. The only God that made it up was the generator, operator, destroyer God. Who is what our ancestors, the Moors, came up with. That's the only one who made up anything. But the Most High, Amun-Ra did not make up any of that. All right, Amun-Ra, what is George Clinton? Everybody has a life to live under the sun, a little light under the sun. I'm gonna stop messing with y'all. Anyway, but seriously, it's and don't get mad at me, everybody. Oh, you worship the sun. Well, do you celebrate your birthday? The only people that don't celebrate birthdays are Jehovah's Witnesses, and Lord have mercy if they right, Yana, how many of you done thrown out the house? Anyway, hit the like button, subscribe button. I'm Justin Powell, fastest 15 minutes on the internet.